Scary telling.
A few hours after I was buried alive, I was thrilled when I heard someone digging me out. The sound of shovels breaking through soil was music to my ears, and I started to get excited at the prospect of finally escaping my nightmare. As the digging grew louder, I began to feel hope rising in my chest. I knew it wouldn't be long before I was pulled from my suffocating prison and back into the world of the living. But my joy quickly faded when I realized the sound was coming from under me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. How could someone be digging beneath me? Was there a network of tunnels beneath the earth? Or was something else at play? As the digging grew louder, I started to hear something else, the sound of breathing. It was heavy and labored, as if the person doing the digging was struggling to stay alive. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that someone was digging their way up from the grave. But who could it be? And why were they buried alive? I strained my ears, trying to listen for any clues, but all I could hear was the sound of dirt shifting above me. I wanted to scream out, to let them know that I was there, but my mouth was filled with soil, and my body felt too weak to move. As the digging grew closer, I could feel the soil beneath me starting to shift. It was as if the earth was coming alive, pulsing with the energy of something dark and sinister. And then, with a sudden rush, something burst through the soil beneath me. I screamed in terror as a hand reached up, grabbing me by the ankle and pulling me down into the darkness below. I thrashed and fought, trying to break free, but the hand was too strong. It pulled me deeper and deeper until I was completely submerged in the earth. And then, with a sudden jolt, everything stopped. The hand released me, and I found myself lying on the ground in a dark, damp room. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I could make out the shape of a figure standing before me. It was a woman, dressed in rags and covered in dirt. Her eyes were wild and manic, and her breath came in ragged gasps. "Who are you?" I demanded, my heart racing with fear. The woman didn't answer. Instead, she just stared at me with a look of hatred and anger. And then I saw it, the glint of something sharp in her hand. It was a knife, and she was raising it high above her head. I screamed and tried to scramble away, but it was too late. The knife plunged down, and I felt a searing pain as it sliced through my skin. I cried out in agony, my body convulsing with shock and fear. But the woman didn't stop. She kept stabbing, over and over again, until I was nothing but a lifeless, bloody mess on the ground. As I slipped into the darkness, I realized that I had been buried alive for a reason. Someone wanted me dead, and they had gone to extreme lengths to make it happen. The digging, the tunnels, the woman, it was all part of some twisted plot to end my life. And now, as I lay dying in the darkness, I knew that there was no escape. The digging had led me to my demise, and there was nothing I could do to change my fate. I was having a pleasant dream when what sounded like hammering woke me. At first, I thought it was just a part of my dream, but as the sound grew louder, I realized it was coming from outside of my dream world. It was coming from somewhere in my bedroom. I opened my eyes, and to my horror, I found myself trapped in complete darkness. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy and restrained. I couldn't lift my arms or legs, and my chest felt tight as if something heavy was sitting on top of me. Panic set in, and I tried to scream, but my mouth was filled with soil. I could barely hear the muffled sound of dirt covering the coffin over my own screams. I was buried alive. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening to me. How could I be buried alive? Was this some kind of sick joke, or was someone trying to kill me? My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that I had to find a way out before I ran out of air. I clawed at the soil above me, using all my strength to try to break free, but it was no use. The earth was too dense, and my body was too weak. As I gasped for air, I heard a faint voice in the distance. It was a man's voice, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I strained my ears, trying to listen, but the voice faded away. I tried to calm myself, thinking that I was just hallucinating, but then the voice came back, louder this time. It was definitely a man's voice, and he was calling out my name. Emily. Can you hear me? It was my best friend, Sarah. Sarah. I screamed, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Help me. I'm buried alive. I heard Sarah's voice grow louder, and soon I felt her hands on the soil above me. She was trying to dig me out. As she dug, I felt the soil start to shift, and I knew I was getting closer to the surface. My heart raced with anticipation, and I felt a flicker of hope that I might make it out alive. But then, the ground above me gave way, and I felt myself falling deeper into the earth. I screamed in terror, feeling the dirt bury me once again. It was then that I realized that Sarah wasn't alone. There was someone else there with her, someone who didn't want me to escape. I heard their voices whispering in the distance, plotting against me. They were trying to kill me, to make sure I never made it out alive. I was trapped, alone, and running out of air. My mind raced as I tried to think of a way out, but it was no use. The darkness was closing in, and soon I would be gone forever. As I took my final breaths, I thought of all the things I would miss. My family, my friends, my dreams. And then everything went dark. I never believed in ghosts until I moved into my grandmother's old house. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I was being watched. The creaky floorboards and the rustling curtains added to the eerie ambience. But, as a single mother, I couldn't afford to be picky about the accommodation. I thought I could cope with the weirdness until my daughter, Lily, started having nightmares. At first, it was just once in a while, but gradually, it became a daily ordeal. She would wake up screaming, and no amount of comforting could soothe her. I tried everything from warm milk to reading bedtime stories, but nothing worked. Lily would just cry herself to sleep, only to be woken up an hour or two later by another nightmare. I was at my wit's end until I noticed something strange. Every time Lily had a nightmare, she would scratch her arms and legs until they bled. The sight of her tiny body covered in bloody cuts broke my heart. I took her to the doctor, and he prescribed some sleeping pills, but they only made her groggy the next day. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to stay awake and keep a watch over Lily. As she slept peacefully, I tried to keep myself awake by browsing social media. But, before I knew it, I had dozed off. When I woke up, I found Lily sitting on the bed, staring at me with a blank expression. I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't respond. I noticed something odd about her pajamas. There were several stitches running across her chest, like a crude sewing job. I was horrified and immediately called the doctor, who advised me to bring her to the hospital. But, before I could do anything, Lily let out a blood-curdling scream, and I watched in horror as her skin started to split open at the seams. From the gaping wound, a ghostly figure emerged. The ghostly figure was a woman with long, unkempt hair and a twisted smile. She hovered over Lily and said, "You can never escape me. I have sewn myself into your daughter's nightmares, and now I'm going to be with her forever. I tried to grab Lily and run, but I was frozen with fear. The ghostly woman flew towards me, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. As she disappeared, I saw the needle and thread in her hand, and I realized what had happened. My grandmother had always warned me about the old sewing kit that she had left behind. She said that if I ever felt threatened, I should use the needle and thread to sew the threat out of my life. But I had dismissed it as an old wives' tale. Now it was too late. Lily was gone, and I was left alone in a haunted house. I don't know what to do, but I keep the needle and thread close to me at all times. Every night, I hear Lily's voice calling out to me from beyond the grave. And every night, I pray that I have the strength to sew her nightmares away. "Hey Ted, you don't look so good," my coworker exclaimed as I walked into the office. I forced a smile and mumbled a quick excuse, trying to hide the fact that I was barely holding it together. My skin felt tight and itchy, as if something was wriggling just beneath the surface. "They're onto me," thought the thing wearing Ted. It had been weeks since the creature had taken over my body, slipping into my skin like a glove. At first, I had been terrified. I couldn't control my own thoughts or actions, and I felt like a prisoner in my own body. But then the creature had started to speak to me, to whisper secrets and plans into my ear. It promised me power and wealth, and I had been unable to resist its tempting words. Now, as I sat at my desk, I felt the creature stirring inside me, its presence growing stronger by the minute. "They're getting closer," it hissed. "We need to move fast." I nodded in agreement, even though I didn't understand what it was talking about. The creature was in control now, and I was just a helpless passenger along for the ride. As the day wore on, I could feel the creature's paranoia growing. It kept muttering about people watching us, about threats and danger lurking around every corner. And then, in the middle of a meeting, it happened. The creature burst forth from my body in a writhing mass of tentacles and teeth, sending my coworkers scrambling for safety. I watched in horror as the creature tore through the office, destroying everything in its path. It was like a tornado of flesh and fury, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. And then, with a sudden jolt, everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital room, my body covered in bandages and tubes. "What happened?" I groaned, struggling to sit up. "You were in a terrible accident," the nurse said, her voice kind and soothing. "You're lucky to be alive." But I knew the truth. I wasn't Ted anymore. The creature had taken over, and I was just a shell of my former self. As I lay there in the hospital bed, I realized that the creature had been right all along. They were onto me, to us. And now, there was no going back. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, knowing that the creature would be waiting for me on the other side. Together, we would wreak havoc and destruction, taking whatever we wanted without fear or hesitation. For I was no longer Ted, I was something else entirely. A creature from the darkest depths of the unknown, wearing a human skin like a mask. And I was coming for them all. I always knew that being a butcher was a challenging job, but I never imagined it would become a nightmare. It was the middle of a meat shortage, and I was struggling to keep up with the demand. But I found a way to make ends meet, and it wasn't pretty. I started luring homeless people into my shop with the promise of a hot meal and some cash. They were desperate and vulnerable, and it was easy to convince them to follow me. I would kill them and chop them up into pieces, selling their flesh as prime meat. At first, it was just one or two people, but soon the demand increased, and I was butchering a person every other day. I couldn't sleep at night, haunted by the images of the mutilated bodies that I had created. But it was all for the sake of survival. The people were starving, and I was providing them with food. I justified my actions to myself, but deep down, I knew that what I was doing was wrong. One day, I received a call from the police. They had found some bones in the alley behind my shop, and they wanted to ask me a few questions. I was sweating profusely as I lied to them, saying that I had nothing to do with the bones. But as the days passed, the police got closer to the truth. They started asking around, and soon they had a lead. The homeless people in the area were starting to wise up to why their friends were disappearing, and they had started talking. I was terrified, knowing that I was about to be caught. I decided to flee, leaving everything behind. I packed a few things and left the city, hoping to start a new life somewhere far away. But my past caught up with me. Every night, I would have nightmares of the people that I had killed. They would come to me, their mutilated bodies oozing blood, demanding justice. I tried to forget, but I couldn't. The guilt and fear were eating me alive. I couldn't keep running forever, and I knew that I had to face the consequences of my actions. One night, I returned to my old shop, intending to turn myself in. But as I stepped inside, I heard a sound that froze me in my tracks. It was the sound of chopping meat, the same sound that I had heard every day for years. I followed the sound, and it led me to the back of the shop. What I saw there will haunt me for the rest of my life. There was a man, chopping up human flesh, just like I used to do. He turned around, and I saw his face. It was my face, but twisted and distorted. He smiled at me and said, "Welcome back, brother. You can't escape your hunger. You are one of us now." I screamed, but there was no one to hear me. The man continued chopping, his hands slick with blood. I realized then that my actions had condemned me to an eternity of suffering. I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. It was just a nightmare, but it felt so real. I got up and looked at myself in the mirror, and I saw something that made me scream. There was a scar on my chest, in the shape of a butcher's knife. It was a reminder of my past, and the price that I had to pay for my hunger.